this is where we left off since the 6th video, and first let's go ahead and delete the monkey. Right click on the monkey to select it and then X and click to delete. Next, we would like to hide everything except for the teapot so that they don't get into the way while we handle the teapot from the bottom. And hold down Shift and select everything else. Okay, maybe this empty object as well, and hit H to hide everything. Okay, now the teapot is the only thing that is still visible. When we finished editing the teapot, we can bring back everything else by hitting Alt H on the keyboard, but yeah, not now. So let's Control Z to undo that, and now we see only the teapot. The next thing we want to do is to reduce the subdivision levels to 0 so that we get a low poly teapot. And let's go ahead and shade it flat as well so that we can see the individual faces. Alright, now is a good time we start unwrapping this teapot. Hit Tab to go to edit mode and then select the edge selection mode. And first let's go ahead and unwrap the lid of the teapot. Hold down Alt and select its entire edge loop and Control E to bring up the edge menu instead of clicking up here. Okay, so Control E to bring up the edge menu and go to Edge Data, Mark Seam. And here as well, Control E, Edge Data, Mark Seam. Okay, so we don't see the bottom of the lid because the teapot is getting in the way, so we need to hide everything except for the lid. Select any edge of the lid and then Control L to select everything that is connected to that edge, and then hit Shift H to hide everything not selected. Okay, so now we can go ahead to unwrap the bottom of the lid. Hold down Alt and select that edge loop and Control E, Edge Data, Mark Seam. Alright, hit 7 to go to the top view so that we can have a sense of direction. And let's unwrap this edge as well. Select these 4 edges and hit Control E and go to Edge Data, Mark Seam. Okay, so the lid of the teapot is done cutting. Let's unhide the rest of the teapot so that we can continue to cut the other parts. And now let's hit Alt H on the keyboard to unhide the other faces, and let's continue. Now we need to hide the lid of the teapot. Click on any edge of the lid and then hit Control L to select everything linked to that edge, and hit H to hide the lid of the teapot. Alright, let's go ahead and unwrap the rest of the teapot. Alright, I think that is good enough, and let's Alt H to bring back the lid. And now it is time to unwrap the teapot. Hit A to select everything and then hit U to bring up the UV unwrap menu and unwrap. Alright, let's change this view to the UV image editor so that we can see the pieces of the teapot. Now with the mouse cursor on the UV image editor, hit A to select everything and then hit U to pack it all into this UV space. Now let's go ahead and check the pieces to make sure that we don't have any error. Hit this triangle to hide the panel, and let's roll the mouse wheel to zoom in and check the different pieces of the teapot. Alright, it looks like everything is good. Alright, it is time to set up the texture for the material. Resize the divisions and turn this view into a shader editor, and let's go ahead and load in our marble textures. With your mouse cursor in the shader editor, hit Shift A to bring up the add menu, go to texture and image texture, and hit open and go to texture and choose the marble base color. Alright, so this is the base color for the marble, and let's go ahead and connect it to the base color of the principal shader. Okay, so let's hit Alt H to bring up the rest of the scene here, and looks like the camera, the lights, and the empty are not showing here, and that is because I accidentally clicked on this overlay button and it did not realize it. So click on it to show the other objects. Alright, so this is our scenes, and let's hit Shift Z to render the view. And as you can see, the marble is now wrapped around the teapot. However, if we zoom in, we can see that the marble is cut here, right where we marked the seam. So it is a good idea to hide the seam where we don't usually look. And let's hit Z and select solid mode to get out of the rendered mode. And let's hit tab to go to the edit mode, and hold down Alt and select this edge loop, and then Control E, edge data, clear seam. Now the seam is gone. Let's go ahead and recreate another seam down here. Control E, edge data, mark seam. Alright, let's hit A to select everything, and then U to bring up the UV mapping menu, and then click unwrap. Alright, the UV should be unwrapped again now, so let's go ahead and check it. It looks fine. Alright, so go back to the shader editor and tap to go out of edit mode and render again. Alright, the seam of the marble is now hidden underneath the tube of the teapot, and it looks pretty good. It is time to turn back on the subsurface modifier. Okay, it looks like we might have an error here. We can see that the texture is stretched here, and this is not supposed to happen in the older version of Blender, so I think this is some kind of bug. And for the time being, there is one way to fix this, and yeah. The way to do that is go to the option part of the subsurface modifier and click on this menu and choose smooth keep corners, and now we have a nice and smooth texture. Let's go ahead and load in the other channel. Hit Shift D to copy the texture, and Shift D to copy again, and this time around we will not use the height file. Instead we will load in the normal file. And in order to use the normal texture, you need to understand what normal is all about. So let's go ahead and cancel the rendered mode. So in order to explain what normal is all about, let me open up a painting software and demonstrate what it means. Alright, so this is Krita, and let's go ahead and create a new file. Okay, so suppose this is the surface of an object. At any given point on this surface, there is a vector that defines the orientation of the surface, and this vector, this is called the normal vector, and the computer will use this vector to determine the way the light bounces off the surface. For example, I might have, say, a ray of light. Okay, let me just change the color a little bit. Alright, so suppose I have a light ray coming this way, and it touches the surface right at this point, and the computer, it will look at the surface orientation, that is the normal vector, and determine that the ray of light should bounce this way. So this is the functionality of the normal vector. And by default, the normal vector is calculated using the vertices that make up the face. For example, here I have a quad face that is made of 4 vertices, alright, and the computer will calculate a normal vector, something like this, that is perpendicular to the surface of the face, alright, something like this. Now this is the calculated normal by default. However, we can override this calculated normal vector by assigning our own normal vector. We can, for example, bend this normal vector to something like this. And so, when a ray of light hit the surface at this angle, something like that, alright, it will bounce something like this. So this is not physically correct, but it gives us an illusion of a bumpy surface. Okay, so how do we bend this normal vector? And the answer to that is the normal map. Okay, the normal map is an image that contains vector data. Okay, and it is not color, it is vector data. So let's go back to Blender and load in the normal texture. Alright, so this is the normal texture, and we need to specify it as non-color data. Otherwise, the computer will treat it as color and it will produce a slightly wrong result. So in order to use this normal texture, we need to create a node called normal map. Hit Shift A to bring up the add menu and go to vector and choose normal map. Here we can connect the color of the normal texture into the color of the normal map, and then connect the output normal to the normal input of the principal shader. Alright, and we will use tangent space, which is the default. Alright, let's go ahead and render the teapot again so that we can see how the normal behave. So the color of the teapot is getting in the way, and it is very hard to see the effect of the normal. So let's hold down Control and then left click and drag over the wire so that we can cut it. Alright, let's take a look at the surface and see if it is effective. Alright, see here. See this little bit of bumpiness here, and as you can see, the normal map is giving us an illusion of a bumpy surface. Alright, but it's the bumpiness is the wrong way. I expect that this area should be lower instead of higher, like it's showing here, and this is because different 3D software have a different way of treating the normal map. So in some cases we need to invert the green channel of the normal texture. Alright, so let's go ahead and invert the green channel of this normal map. Alright, so hit Shift A to bring up the add menu, go to converter, and then separate RGB. Alright, this node will separate the 3 channel of the color into separate grayscale values. Alright, and we are going to create another node called combined RGB and place it here. Connect the blue to the blue and leave the green here. Okay, let's reposition our nodes so that we can have a little bit of space, and yeah, hit Shift A again, and this time go to color and choose invert so that we can invert the green channel. Alright, and connect the inverted values to the green channel of the combined RGB node, and now we can see that the normal map is working properly. Alright, so that is how you use the normal map. Let's connect the color of the marble back to the surface. Okay, let's move on to the roughness texture. Open the roughness texture, and again switch to non-color data and connect the color output to the roughness input of the principal shader, and finally reposition the node so that it makes more visual sense. The teapot is now complete, and now it looks like it is made of marbles. And so the teapot is complete. And let's go ahead and make the final render for the teapot. Select the camera by right click on the edge here and go to the camera tab and go down to the depth of field and lower the radius to something like 1 centimeter so that we can have a clearer surface here. And finally, let's shade the teapot smooth, alright, and hit F12 to make the final render. So by now you should have a solid idea of what 3D art is all about, and that is the purpose of this series. And for the next series we are going to dig deeper into the functionalities of Blender, and we're going to attempt to make a more complex object and practice a little bit more on the tools. Alright, I'll see you next time.